Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. A small, quiet town nestled in the outskirts of the Appalachian Mountains, Cedar Grove seemed untouched by time, a sanctuary for those wishing to escape the chaos of modern life. Lush greenery surrounded it, a sea of rolling hills and dense forests that whispered stories of old. The air was usually filled with laughter and the sound of children riding their bicycles down the winding street. However, beneath this charming veneer lay a dark undercurrent that would soon rupture the tranquility. On an unremarkable Tuesday morning in March, the town was greeted by an unsettling sight. It was the kind of silence that unnerved even the most seasoned residents. The community began to stir with concern as the local news reported a missing person. Clara Easton, a beloved librarian known for her warm smile and devotion to her work. Her absence from the Cedar Grove Public Library was felt like a void-on that rippled through the lives of everyone who crossed her path. As hours turned into days, the search intensified. Friends and family plastered the town with flyers bearing Clara's beaming picture, hopeful smiles masking their growing despair. Volunteers formed search parties, combing the dense woods, a tapestry of nature that, for the first time, felt sinister. Cedar Grove had never experienced something like this. The community's heart raced with anxiety, and with each passing moment, the fear that Clara wouldn't return grew more palpable. The police department, still reeling from the very idea that violence could touch their little kingdom, began piecing together a timeline of Clara's last known whereabouts. But as they followed each lead, it became evident that this was no simple case of a woman gone missing. The layers of Clara's life were intricate, revealing ties to secrets that ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. The victim. Clara Easton was more than just the librarian of Cedar Grove. She was the embodiment of the town's spirit kind, nurturing and unwaveringly dedicated. Having grown up in Cedar Grove, Clara was a familiar face for generations of families who visited the library, a place that stood as a beacon of knowledge and comfort. The townsfolk often sought her guidance for everything from research projects to personal dilemmas, and her ability to lend a listening ear made her a beloved fixture. At 32, Clara had a quiet elegance about her. She wore her chestnut hair tied back in a loose bun, often decorated with an assortment of colorful pins, a nod to her vibrant personality. The library was her sanctuary, filled with the scent of well-loved books and the soft murmurs of children discovering new worlds. Clara's voice would ring, warm and melodic, guiding young readers as they ventured into the realms of their imagination. But Clara's life wasn't without shadows. Behind her cheerful demeanor lay a past not easily spoken of. As a child, she had witnessed her father's gradual descent into mental illness, which led him to disappear one stormy night after a heated argument with Clara's mother. The community whispered about Aitan, unspoken tragedy imbuing Clara's childhood with a sense of loss that never fully left her. Yet she chose to channel those experiences into empathy, becoming a figure of solace for others. In the days leading up to her disappearance, her friends recalled small changes in her behavior. Clara had been preoccupied, often lost in thought, her laughter less frequent. She spoke of feeling watched, but dismissed it as an overactive imagination, a byproduct of the stories that surrounded her daily. Little did anyone know, a malignant thread wove through her life, drawing ever closer to a reckoning one entwined with the very secrets that defined her existence. The crime scene. By the 5th day of Clara's disappearance, the search efforts began to yield results, albeit ones that were far more sinister than the community had hoped for. It was a crisp morning when volunteers, retracing their paths into the dense thicket behind the library, stumbled upon a secluded glade. The shimmering sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting a serene glow over what, moments ago, had felt like a sanctuary. But the tranquility was shattered by what they discovered half buried beneath a pile of autumn Levesa leather-bound book, its spine cracked and pages yellowed with age. Trembling hands brushed away the debris, revealing not just a book, but a series of hastily written notes, filled with Clara's neat handwriting fragments of thoughts that reflected her fears and desires. Her detailed observations of small-town life fluttered alongside darker musings, her apprehensions about certain figures in Cedar Grove, a record of patterns she had detected, and unnamed shadows that loomed just outside her vision. The discovery raised a chilling specter of questions. Had Clara been keeping a diary of concerns, a log of someone or something that had threatened her peace? Law enforcement was swiftly called to the scene. Officers cordoned off the area, marking it as a crime scene immediately. The atmosphere shifted from hope to dread, the volunteers now mere onlookers as detectives combed the ground for any further evidence. It was clear they weren't just looking for Clara now. They were hunting for a clue that would elucidate what had truly transpired. In the midst of their search, one officer noted something glinting in the underbrush. With careful precision, he dug it out a silver locket, dented but undeniably beautiful, engraved with a delicate pattern. Inside was a photograph of Clara as a young girl with her father, a haunting reminder of her tumultuous past. The locket, once a token of cherished memories, cast new light on the darker layers of her life. It was a bridge to the very secrets Clara had fought to reconcile, but was now tangled in a web of vulnerabilities. The locket dangled like a thread, beckoning them to pull and unravel. The early investigation. As investigators gathered the gathered fragments of Clara's life from scattered locations and shadowy memories, the early days of the investigation unfolded in layers, each more complex than the last. Detective Sarah Winters, a seasoned investigator with Cedar Grove's police department, took the lead on the case, drawn to Clara's story by the subtle yet intense connection she felt with the young librarian. To Sarah, Clara was not just another victim. She represented the heartbroken hum of the community, a kindred spirit, still reeling from the echoes of loss. The first step for Detective Winters was to interview those closest to Clara. Friends and family described her as a nurturing soul, but they also recognized the weight she carried. Jess, Clara's childhood friend, mentioned an unsettling incident just weeks prior, when Clara had confided her fears about someone watching her. She didn't believe it herself, just thought she was being silly. Jess recalled, her eyes downcast, though the memory felt as fresh as the day they'd spoken. Next, they turned their attention to Clara's professional life. Several patrons described her interactions with a few men who frequented the library for obscure research. One patron, Mark, a withdrawn man known for his peculiar interests in local folklore, seemed to draw Clara's attention more than others. She was just trying to help him, he insisted, though his nervous demeanor suggested there was more to the relationship. Detective Winters noted the detail carefully, realizing that even the most innocuous connections could have hidden depth. Simultaneously, the forensic team began dissecting the glade where the diary was found, gathering everything from the soil to the microfiber trails that might lead them to Clara. Each tick of the clock felt like a drum beat echoing through the hollow spaces in their hearts, a rhythmic reminder that time was slipping away. As the detectives explored Clara's connections and dissected the layers of her life, the realization struck somewhere amidst her gentle smile and love for community lay truths that remained shrouded in shadows, waiting to be brought into the light. The task at hand was monumental, and with every piece of evidence, the tale spun sadly darker. The dead ends. In the days that followed Clara's disappearance, the investigation hit a wall. Each lead that Detective Winters pursued seemed to dissolve like morning mist, revealing nothing but empty trails and unanswered questions. Apprehension gripped the town, growing from whispered speculation to open frustration as Clara's absence stretched on, with no signs of a breakthrough. Every door knocked upon felt like a final dismissal, and with each dead end, the community's hope began to dim. One of the biggest disappointments came from Mark, the man who frequented the library. After hours of questioning, he quickly faded into paranoia as he recounted his own world of books and shadows, struggling to distance himself from Clara's story. She was kind. I didn't mean anything by it. I take notes, that's all. That's all. Just research, he stammered, darting glances as if the truth might leap from the walls to accuse him. When background checks revealed no signs of wrongdoing, the detectives were left with little more than unease. Meanwhile, the focus shifted to Clara's home. After obtaining a search warrant, Detective Winters and her team meticulously scoured the quiet cottage filled with books and trinkets, reflecting an artist's spirit. But even there, they found no clues, no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away from her front porch, and no incriminating evidence. Just an empty home echoing Clara's absentee, a living space frozen in time, showcasing fragments of a life abruptly halted. Determined not to yield to despair, Sarah began combing through digital records, digging into Clara's online presence, hoping to unearth any correspondences or unusual contact. Hidden within the depths of her archived emails was a thread of messages with a pseudonymous user on a local chat forum about Cedar Grove's mysteries. The messages grew increasingly cryptic, alluding to protecting oneself from the past. The discovery piqued her interest. Yet after reaching out to the forum's moderators for detail, she hit yet another barrier. A user had vanished, their tracks wiped clean. Sarah felt the familiar frustration rise within her. It was like chasing shadows in the moonlight, each twist revealing only more darkness. As more dead ends piled up, the community's initial fervor began to wane. An endless cycle of unanswered questions, slowly erasing Clara's once celebrated presence from the hearts of many. A break in the case. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind of wet, dreary day that seemed to match the heavy sentiment hanging over Cedar Grove. Just as hope was beginning to fade, a breakthrough appeared amid the relentless gray sky. Detective Winters received a call from the forensic team. They had successfully extracted DNA from the silver locket found in the glade. Though it was tantalizingly incomplete, it sparked an uneven flicker of hope. With the lab work still underway, Sarah retraced her steps and re-interviewed those in Clara's life, hoping to uncover any overlooked details that might lead to a connection. During a late evening interview with Clara's mother, Evelyn, a quiet woman burdened by loss, a subtle clue emerged. Clara mentioned a friend, someone new she had met at the library. He was different, so eager to help, but she was unsure of him, Evelyn stated, her brow furrowing as she tried to recall. Intrigued, Sarah pressed for more information, but found Evelyn's memories were fragmented, filled only with descriptions of an enigmatic man who had visited the library intermittently. As Sarah left the modest home, a sense of urgency coursed through her veins. She returned to the library archives, searching for attendance records and any notes Clara had made about her patrons. There, buried within the numerous ledgers, was a name that surfaced more than the others: Elliot Carson, a local artist known for his introspective work and unconventional methods. Determined to find an angle, Winter reached out to the local gallery where Elliot had exhibited his art. After a brief chat with the curator, a picture of the artist emerged, one of someone unpredictable but well-regarded. He had spoken admiringly of Clara during his visits, often discussing ideas about community and stories woven into the fabric of every book. And yet, there was an unsettling edge to his passion, a fervor that made the curator uneasy. With Elliot's connection solidifying in her mind, Sarah anticipated that the DNA results would soon give them a crucial anchor amidst the swirling uncertainty. The breath of possibility invigorated her spirit as the fragmented pieces of this haunting puzzle began to converge. She prepared herself to confront Elliot Carson, suspecting that answers at long last might soon be unveiled. Or perhaps more layers of complexity would lie in wait. The rain continued to fall, but hope began to bloom beneath the chill, weaving through the town's collective breathing, as they dared to believe that Clara's story was still alive. The suspect. The following day, the air felt heavy with anticipation as Detective Winters arranged to meet with Elliot Carson. The appointment was set for a quiet cafe just off the main street, a familiar haunt for locals seeking refuge from the bustle of life. As Sarah stepped inside, the aroma of brewed coffee mingled with the soft murmur of conversation, grounding her momentarily amidst the storm of uncertainties swirling in her mind. Elliot arrived shortly after, his appearance casual yet marked by an intensity that kept the heads turning in the room. Clad in a worn leather jacket and jeans that bore traces of paint, he stepped towards Sarah with an easy smile, one that seemed to mask an undercurrent of nervous energy. "Detective Winters, I've been looking forward to this. Clara spoke highly of you," he began, his tone warm, but his eyes betrayed him. Shimmers of anxiety danced within them. As they settled into a corner table, Sarah carefully navigated the conversation. She led him through pleasantries discussing art and community, all the while discreetly observing his reactions. When Clara was mentioned, the air turned taut. She was so passionate, always sharing stories with children, Elliot said, his voice steady but his hands fidgeting with a coffee cup that trembled slightly in his grip. "Elliot, I'm sure you know she's been missing for several days now," Sarah continued, gauging his response. His brow furrowed, eyes widening momentarily. Yet he caught himself quickly. "Yes, it's terrible. I was really hoping she'd just taken some time away to recharge," he replied, a hint of desperation creeping into his tone. Sarah decided to confront him directly. "We found a locket belonging to her at a crime scene, and you were one of her last known visitors," she stated, watching for any shift in his demeanor. A brief flicker of agitation crossed Elliot's face, masked by an exaggerated frown. "I wanted to protect her. I told her to stay safe, especially considering some of the people she was interacting with online. He shot back, his voice rising slightly. I'd like to take a closer look at your interactions with Clara. Sarah replied, steady. Elliot hesitated, sweat forming at his temples, and the tension was palpable. Sarah realized she had struck a nerve, one that connected to the raw materials of his artistry, obsession, inspiration, and perhaps a darkness festering just beneath the surface. As they wound down their conversation, Sarah felt a quiet determination again. The layers around Elliot were thick, but cracks had begun to show. She knew that somewhere among his wild expressions and artistic desires lay either the key to Clara's fate or the truth that would shatter everything. With unanswered questions dancing in her mind and a hunch pushing her forward, Sarah felt the narrative of Clara's story shift again, creeping closer to a resolution that could end the heartache or cast a shadow deeper than any had ever imagined. The trial. The autumn leaves crunched beneath the feet of onlookers as they gathered outside the Cedar Grove courthouse, a palpable sense of tension hanging heavy in the chilly air. The trial of Elliot Carson had become a focal point for the small community, drawing spectators from neighboring towns and igniting waves of discussion that traversed dinner tables and coffee shops alike. Word of Clara Easton's tragic story had spread like wildfire, each retelling a mixture of sympathy and suspicion, with the town divided between grief and the thirst for justice. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged with a sense of urgency and anticipation. Detective Sarah Winters sat in the front row, her expression stern yet reflective. She had worked tirelessly since Clara's disappearance, her pursuit of the truth driving her to uncover layers of deception intertwined. Now, the culmination of those efforts. The prosecution laid out its case methodically, presenting evidence that painted a troubling picture of Elliot. Testimonies from witnesses who had seen him near the library in the days leading up to Clara's disappearance were punctuated by the forensic evidence, the DNA traces connected to the locket found at the glade. The courtroom fell silent as Sarah watched Elliot's face morph through a range of emotions: confusion, resentment, and an emotional wall that gave way to cracks of vulnerability. Clara feared something was off with Elliot, the prosecutor stated, recounting accounts from Clara's friends that spoke of unease and fear stemming from his obsession over her art and his growing interest in her life. Yet she remained kind, hoping to help him navigate his shadows instead. The words sunk heavy in the courtroom, echoing Clara's compassion against the backdrop of suspicion, painting Elliot as a tragic figure ensnared by his own demons. But with the defense's turn, the narrative shifted. A defense attorney rose, intent on painting Elliot as a misunderstood artist, one whose infatuations were mischaracterized as dangerous obsession. Testimonies painted him as socially awkward yet gently a creative soul, whose deep emotions sometimes overwhelmed him. Elliot had only ever wanted to inspire Clara, he argued, to work together on something beautiful, not to harm. As the defense concluded, the weight of the evidence bore down on the attendees. The jury was sent to deliberate, and anticipation hung palpably in the air. Sarah felt an undercurrent of dread. The truth lay heavy, Yet there existed an uncertainty that filled the courtroom with electricity. In this dance of justice, where art collided with reality, the fate of a man hung on the scales. But so too did the love of a community for a woman they had lost. Hours crawled by until the doors creaked open and the jury re-entered with solemn expressions. As the verdict echoed through the hushed courtroom, a sense of finality swept over the crowdette within the heart of it all. Sarah knew that while it might bring closure for some, the shadows that Clara had navigated remained tangled, still waiting to be unveiled. The ghost of her absence loomed large, demanding remembrance long after the gavel met the desk. The aftermath. The gavel's echo felt like a thunderclap, reverberating through the hearts of those present in the courtroom. As the verdict for Elliot Carson wrapped the trial in a bittersweet conclusion, Cedar Grove found itself grappling with the fallout of choices made, the echoes of Clara Easton's story now firmly implanted in the collective memory. The tension that had held the community in its thrall lingered long after the jury was dismissed, a palpable shroud that refused to lift entirely. In the weeks following the trial, the town began the painstaking process of healing. Clara's absence remained a wound that throbbed silently, buried beneath the surface of every interaction. The library, once a sanctuary of joy and learning, held a profound silence where her laughter had once resonated. Empty chairs served as reminders of the warmth lost. In an effort to honor her, the town organized a memorial, dedicating a bench in her name near the library entrance, where children could gather to read and reflect. Detective Sarah Winters took to this gathering with a sense of hope mingled with sorrow. Standing in front of the community, she spoke of Clara's spirit, her compassion, the light she brought to others. "We must carry her legacy forward," Sarah urged, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Let us cherish the stories she ignited in our hearts. Share them loud and clear so that her presence continues to inspire. Let us not shy away from the shadows, but instead confront them with the light she left behind." As the days turned to weeks, the trial's fallout began to expose not just the scars of loss, but the cracks in the community itself. Conversations that had skirted around the fringes of conflict emerged, challenging perceptions and revealing underlying prejudices. Some rallied to support Elliot, championing his plight, framing him as a victim of circumstance rather than as the perpetrator of violence. Within the heart of the town, a chasm formed, and prejudices flared up, the lines between guilt and innocence blurring dangerously in the wake of tragedy. For Sarah, the aftermath of the trial was bittersweet. She had fought to unravel the threads of Clara's disappearance, protecting a legacy that needed preservation, and yet the burden weighed heavily on her conscience. In her dreams, Clara's face appeared, pleading for a resolution that went beyond the veil of the courtroom. As she sat on the newly dedicated bench outside the library, she stared at the trees, swaying gently in the breeze, their whispers reminiscent of Clara's laughter. The town could rebuild, heal, and seek to understand, but Clara's story continued to pulsate beneath their shared existence. To comprehend loss is to understand the silence that follows, and Sarah knew that while justice could be served, the shadows of Clara's life would endure, beckoning everyone to explore the complexities of human nature. In those moments of quiet contemplation, Sarah resolved to be an advocate for voices lost within the chaos, to ensure the shadows that lingered were acknowledged, allowing hope to intertwine with sorrow as they moved forward. Reflection. As the last leaves of autumn fell, Detective Sarah Winters prioritized a new rhythm in her life, one attuned to the lingering echoes of Clara Easton's story. In the months that followed the trial, she often revisited Cedar Grove, her footsteps leading her back to the bench dedicated to Clara, a place that had transformed from a mere piece of furniture into a monument of memory, hope, and unresolved questions. During her quiet moments spent there, she observed the world around her as children poured into the library, their laughter intermingling with the rustling of pages. They sat where Clara once had, their imaginations unfurling brilliantly, while the shadows of loss quietly danced at the edges. It struck Sarah that within the spaces where Clara's absence was most potent, life persisted, despite the ache. Each joyful moment shared among friends served as a reminder that even in sorrow, resilience can blossom. The lessons Clara's story imparted reached beyond the confines of injustice. They rippled through the community, kindling conversations about mental health, the complexities of relationships, and the importance of vigilance without suspicion. Sarah became impassioned to ensure that Clara's story did not remain an echo of tragedy, but transformed into a beacon. She initiated workshops that fostered awareness of mental health issues and supported those struggling with their shadows, echoing Clara's unwavering compassion that once touched so many lives. In the soft twilight, Sarah realized something vital. Clara didn't simply lose her life. She offered others the chance to examine the very fabric of their own. Reflection, it seemed, was a canvas upon which they could paint a future filled with understanding, creating a legacy that would illuminate the darkest corners. Sarah vowed to carry Clara's light, and in doing so, she illuminated her own path, ensuring that the story bent toward justice, healing, and the love that transcends loss.